Metal Matt, Alice Cooper here. Good name, by the way. I'll tell Rob that I talked to you. You're a singer-songwriter. And the best thing I can say to a guy like Metal Matt is, whatever you do, don't rust.
Hey guys, Metal Matt here, and I've got the honor of welcoming Dennis Dunaway from the original Alice Cooper band onto the channel today. Played on such albums, Muscle of Love, Billion Dollar Babies, School's Out, of course, you know, the iconic School's Out album. And now there's a new album, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. After all these years, you're back together, and you're dropping an album, which is, you know, news which all the Alice Cooper fans are going crazy for at the moment because it was kept under your hat for so long. It was such a surprise for everyone, you know, that you're actually back together doing an album. So tell me a bit about that. How did you all get back together to do this? And
Well, it was a step-by-step process. I mean, we would get together with Alice for his fundraisers for the Solid Rock Teen Centers out in Phoenix, Arizona, where Alice and his wife Cheryl are big participants. So we would get together for those, and then we would submit songs for Alice's solo albums and get together to record those. And then when I wrote my book, I think that kind of helped bring people together, even though before that, even in 2011, we were inducted in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. So we were on stage performing for that with Steve Hunter on guitar and a bunch of children singing Schools Out with us. But so all of these things kind of brought everybody back together. And when I put out my book, Snakes, Guillotines, Electric Chairs, My Adventures in the Alice Cooper Group, I did a book event at a record store in Dallas, Texas. And I got Neil and Michael and Alice to show up for a big surprise concert right in the record store. And they filmed that, and they also recorded it, which they weren't planning to do that professionally. They were just doing it for their own, you know, safekeeping. But it turned out so well that that was released live from the AstroTurf, Alice Cooper, by this guy, Chris Penn, who has since, in recent years, passed away. But he made this whole thing happen, and that brought us together. And then I get a call, like a couple of years ago, I get a call from Alice and Bob Ezrin. They're like, "Hey, Dan, you know, we've been out in, Alice was out in Phoenix, and Neil and Michael were there, and they were getting together and kicking around ideas for the fun of it." And then they said, well, we were thinking, do you want to do an album? And I said, well, hello, what do you think I've been saying for 51 years now?
exactly.
Yeah. It's like you're preaching to the choir here. So then they were saying, oh, okay. I was saying, oh, what do you have like a theme or anything so I can make sure I have songs for that? And they said, no, we'll do the best of the lot. And I said, oh, the cream of the crop. And they both started laughing because my phone had cut out. They thought I said cream of the crap. And they decided that's going to be the name of the album.
That sounds good. Yeah, that would have worked.
But this thing was like, so that was like over 2 years ago. And so we submit a bunch of songs, and Neil and I sending them between us and sending them to Bob and all of this. And, you know, and then there would be a long period where we wouldn't hear anything about it. So we'd think, oh, well, this isn't going to happen again. And then we get a call, hey, Alice is going to be in Phoenix and Neil and Michael are out here. Dennis, fly on out and let's get together in the studio. So it was just the four of us in the recording studio at one of the Solid Rock Teen Centers. And we were just, you know, having fun and jamming. And and playing this song or that, kind of just going, flying by the seat of our pants. But it was designed. Bob Ezrin wasn't there intentionally. He agreed that it was a good idea just to get the band back together in a room and working on stuff. And it was like not really necessary. We didn't have any rust to get on. We didn't have to like get anything back. It was already still there. So but we had a blast, and that helped bring things more focused. But then another long period of nothing happening. So, oh boy. So we had like submitted, I bet we had more than 70 songs submitted between Neil and
Wow.
Michael and I. And then Bob said, "Oh, well, let's get together in the studio with me." And he booked some studio. I said, "Wait a minute, I'm not sure about that place. You didn't like it last time." So I said, "I've got an idea." And so we booked Carriage House Studios, which Neil and I had worked at before many times over the years. I even narrated the audio for my book there. But also Bob Ezrin used to live near that studio, and at one point he had a lot of his equipment there, and he had done some recordings there with other bands. So this fell into place nicely because by then Neil was out here near this studio, and so was I. So Michael flew out, and Alice and Bob were there, and we went into the studio. I thought to choose which 10 of the 70 songs we wanted to do, and because there's no way. I kept asking them, "What songs do you want to do? I don't want to learn 70 songs."
Definitely.
And so I could not get an answer. It kept changing. And so I thought we were just going to go and pick the songs and whip them into shape, and then book some studio time later to actually lay them down. But no, walked into the studio and we were recording.
Wow, so that's a bit pressure.
Yeah, but it was great. And so it was combined like the way we used to rehearse to whip songs into shape in pre-production before we went into the studio in the old days. So it was, a lot of it was just us following wherever the creative gods were directing us. We just went, we just make up a song, or we would just all of a sudden do a song that we thought was not even really in the running. So a lot of stuff like that. But we were all we've been around the block a few times, so we know the studio, and we've watched Bob Ezrin and other very professional producers and engineers, and Jack Douglas and Jack Richardson, and we've worked with the best. So we were like sponges and soaked that all up. So the reason we could do this album without doing 2 weeks of pre-production, there's two reasons. Number one, we had learned so much since the old days about how to take a song apart and put it back together properly. And also because of technology. Now, if we decide we want the arrangement to be different, we can cut and paste. In the old days, that was a big deal.
I'm sure.
In fact, in the old days, even if I had one bass note that I wanted to change, Jack Richardson would make me record the whole song again.
Oh no.
That was on Love It to Death and Killer and Muscle of Love. If I had one note, I had to record the whole song again, the whole track. Because he was a bass player, and he would just say, "Hey, you're going to be playing this song a million times in your life, so you man up and get in there,"
Yeah, it makes sense.
But now, and therefore, since a lot of it was so spontaneous, a lot of it was us just trying to agree on an arrangement so that we could lay down the track. And and me watching the guitar player's chord hand for the songs that I didn't know that well. And then Bob in the control room in our headphones, we could hear him say, "Here comes the bridge," and stuff like that. That's how new these songs were.
Wow.
So I could, and there's a lot of pressure there when you do that, a lot of pressure. But we stay focused at the job at hand, and each guy has his own specialty, and we all know what each other's specialty is. If I think, hey, we need a new chord here, then we look at Michael. Hey, what's the tempo? We look at Neil. All of that, we all have worked together so long. It's all well established. But even though we're very focused and work really hard, we're willing to do a take 50 times if that's what it takes.
Yeah.
But we also have a lot of humor. We just had a blast. It was so much fun.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah, it must have been great just being back together and back like the old days, I'm guessing. Did it kind of come back to you in the same way? Was it like a new experience, or was it like stepping in the studio years ago, apart from all the advancements that you talked about?
It was more like stepping into the studio in the old days, because when we get together, we all revert to high school kids, because that's where we all started together, so that sophomoric humor is rampant. And
I can imagine,
so it's in fact, in a way, because Glenn Buxton was there in spirit, a lot of the feel was early in our friendship, so, I mean, we were in high school, we always put each other down all the time.
How did it?
It's sarcastic humor, and we expect it. If I walk out of the room, I know when I walk back in, somebody's already whittled me down,
Yeah.
and then when they walk out, then it's their turn.
Well,
But so that also had a lot to do with Glenn Buxton's spirit, which is very prominent on the second half of this album, because more and more as the album goes on, it goes more and more in the direction of our early days as the Spiders, and the kind of music that in the days when Glenn was the only real musician in the band, and he was showing us how to play these certain types of 3-chord progression songs and all of that. So the album keeps going along, and then about 2/3 of the way through, all of a sudden it just starts getting more and more Glenn Buxton, and I'm very proud of how we managed to do that.
yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, it sounds like he was definitely with you in spirit. That's great that the album kind of, you could feel the vibe, as it was coming along. He was a real legend. He's a fantastic player, and yeah, it's so good that you managed to capture that. The Alice Cooper fans of the original band are going to want to hear that, and that's great that you've managed to kind of capture that. And yeah, that must have been really nice sort of experience to feel that, and for the music to go in that direction again. So do you have any kind of memories of kind of getting together and writing the songs? Was it hard picking the songs together? Were you all coming with different songs this time, or was it kind of organic? You kind of just went with the ones you felt, or was it quite difficult to pin it down, because you must have all come in with different material, I guess?
It was tricky to pin it down, because it was overwhelming, the quantity of songs we had. We could have done 5 albums, but because we are all so collaborative, it's like none of us can say, okay, we're not going to do that song. That's not how we work. It's more like a majority rules, and then that's the direction we go. And once in a while, if there's some difference of opinion that looks like it's going to compromise us meeting the deadline of the studio time, then Bob Ezrin will maybe come in and make the final deciding vote, which that's fine with all of us. He's the producer. So there's there's never any contention among us. We sometimes people might, if they were walking by our rehearsal room or in the studio, they might think, "Oh my God, these guys are all screaming at each other. They must hate each other," and the things we're saying about each other. But our humor is put down humor, which doesn't translate to black and white in a book. It
Uh,
looks nasty if you don't specify that it's an LOL all the time.
yeah, yeah.
But we're passionate about whatever each of us thinks is the best idea for that part of the song, and we're willing to debate it. And a lot of times, volume is one of the deciding factors.
Yeah. Uh,
But we never get personal. It's never like putting down the other person. It's putting down the idea that they might think is best.
yeah, yeah, that's fair enough. I guess that's how band dynamics work with any band. You're going to have that element of
Of course,
sort of
that's
fighting.
collaboration. You
Yeah,
know, if it was just me going in and it's my solo album and I have final say, okay, that's understood. But this is a collaboration which has to be understood. You also have to know well enough about when a song sounds good, when a part sounds good, to not try to change it just because an idea popped into your head.
mm,
And we all have that sensibility too after all of these years.
that's great. Yeah, yeah, and obviously you've got a new addition as well that's joined the band. Someone who I spoke with a couple of days ago, and a lot of the Cooper fans are asking, "Who is this guy?" They thought you might have got in. It's someone who's been playing guitar for many years, but you've went for a younger kind of musician. You're giving a younger guy a chance who's kind of got that same kind of energy as you guys, and he kind of fits in really perfectly. Gyasi, can you tell me how that come about, and how it
Yeah.
was actually working with him? And
I saw your interview with Gyasi. It was
oh,
very good. In fact, that led to me jumping at the chance as soon as you reached out to me.
oh,
Yeah, well, let's go back a little earlier. We've got like a lot of our demos, like Joe Bouchard from Blue Oyster Cult and Blue Coop, helped me with some of my demos, and Nick Dudkovsky and Russ Wilson on drum. And Neil had all of Rick Tedesco with him, and Rick Tedesco worked with me. So we had Rick Tedesco in the studio at this session I was just telling you about when we laid down all the basic tracks. But then we needed a couple more songs. At that point, we were all racking our minds for who we should get to play Glenn's part of what we needed for the music.
yeah.
And everybody had their own ideas. Rick Tedesco came up, and I have a lot of friends that are excellent guitar players and great guys. And then Michael had his ideas, and it started turning into, we had too many ideas, not even counting Alice saying, let's get Slash and all of that kind of stuff,
Mm,
all of that was great, except we decided, okay, we're going to have Rick Tedesco come in the studio with us, just because he knows some of the songs that Michael doesn't know, and that'll help us along. And Rick was great. He played on the bed tracks, and he played an amazing lead part on a song, Blood on the Sun. But then when we needed a couple more songs, and Bob said, hey, there's this guy in Nashville, Gyasi, everybody's telling me that's the guy you need to get. And this would settle it. Instead of you guys trying to get your own ideas in there, then I'll decide who this guy is,
yeah.
but only if it works. So like Gyasi said on your show, he came in just kind of like to see how the fit was, and we laid down a couple of tracks, including a Yardbirds song, because Jeff Beck had just passed away at that point, and Yardbirds were our big heroes. Well, as it turns out, Gyasi is a big Yardbirds fan as well. So we laid down I Ain't Done Wrong, and it was cooking. And so that went well. and then we laid down another track. I can't remember which one now, but we laid down two tracks that day. And not only uh, were we able to communicate with him just like we would have with Glenn. In other words, Gyasi's got he's a seasoned studio guy. He knows how that goes down. So there was no problem there. And on top of all of that, he's like the nicest guy in the world, you know. So
He is, yeah.
okay, Neil and I are still thinking, well, I don't know, he doesn't sound like Glenn, but then we went to Gyasi's live show that night. His band is great. They all have the look and they all have the stage moves and everything. So we went to the show and it opened with just Gyasi sitting in a chair with a dobro guitar and an acoustic guitar and even an old cigar box guitar.
Wow.
And he's doing this deep Delta blues stuff.
Okay.
And we're like, what? Wow, okay. I didn't know he did that, you know. And so then after that set, Gyasi goes in the back room and then he comes out and it's all glammed out and he really knows how to control the stage and put on a highly entertaining show.
Yeah.
And the band was great. So, and then they all came over to our table and hung out with us after the show, and it was great. So that was the clincher. Then Neil and I said, he's the guy, you know, Bob's right. And most of what he does on the album, which is a lot, came after the fact. He was doing overdubs and stuff over what we had already done. I wasn't in the studio other than the two songs that Neil and I did in Nashville.
Oh, wow. So yeah. So he just had the sound, and yeah. It sounds like he was full of surprises, and I think we'll hear that on the album. Maybe even some surprises to you. I don't know if you've heard every piece of what he's done yet. I don't know with the overdubs and everything, but yeah, it sounds like it's going to be full of surprises. Yeah, no, that sounds really cool.
Oh yeah, I've heard. I'm well familiar with the album. I have the insider version.
Oh, sweet.
And thanks to you on your show, I never knew this. We did this song, What a Sid, which is dedicated to Glenn Buxton. And what a Sid is what Glenn would say if you did something dumb. You know, if you walked into a room and tripped, then Glenn would go, what a Sid. It had nothing to do with Syd Barrett, like a lot of people think, since Pink Floyd stayed at our house on their first tour.
Oh.
But Gyasi on your show was talking about his love of Django Reinhardt. And what he played on my song, which turned out to be What a Sid, is very Django Reinhardt. And when I heard him play that, I thought, well, okay, here's another level, but I didn't realize that he had the Django Reinhardt thing going too.
That's really cool. Well, I'm glad you learned something. Yeah. He was full of surprises for me. I learned a lot. He was very interesting to hear, and it sounds like you guys just got along great, which is really nice. And I'm really happy for him. You know, he got the opportunity, and like I said on his interview, it's nice to see someone, you know, given a chance who's starting out, or well, he's probably more than starting out, but you know what I mean. He's kind of, you know, he's a newer musician. It's nice to see him, you know, given such a cool opportunity, and I think we're going to hear him shine on the album along with you guys. You know, it sounds like it's going to be really exciting. You dropped Black Mamba recently as a single, and you know, what do you remember about that? Any stories about that?
That was one of the songs that we wasn't even included in the 70s demo submitted.
Oh, wow.
It was we went in the studio and then Neil said, kind of like in a let's warm up sort of frame of mind, Michael, what's that riff that we were jamming on out in Phoenix? You know, the two of them would get together, and so Michael started playing the riff. Actually, this came about when we got together, just the four of us out in Phoenix.
Wow.
And then because Neil and Michael had just jammed on it the day before or something. So Michael started playing the riff, and then Alice got the idea, it popped into his head right away. This should be about the most dangerous snake in the world, the Black Mamba.
Definitely.
And we thought, oh yeah, let's do like a New Orleans kind of voodoo-ish sort of a thing, and so the melody developed. I mean, we had a big chalkboard like we used to use in the old days, and so we draw on the chalkboard the arrangement and maybe some of the lyrics or whatever we needed to remember.
Wow.
And then we'd have an eraser and just erase a part and move it to another part if we wanted to change the arrangement. That's how we wrote Halo of Flies.
Wow.
But that one had a lot of parts.
Yeah, that's a
The
complex.
chalkboard. So if you erased the part, you had to find a place to fit it up here. But anyway, so Alice even forgot the melody at one point. We went in the studio to listen to what it sounded like and came back out, and Alice forgot what the melody was.
Oh, no.
Luckily, I remembered it. And so as soon as I started singing it, then it came back to him.
Oh,
And he didn't. So when we got out to this more recent session, which was the whole band with Ezrin, then we ran it down again. And by then, Alice had zeroed in on a lot of the lyrics, and then after the fact, the overdubs. Originally, I thought, okay, these songs are so new, I'm going to probably, in my head, while we're laying down tracks, I'm thinking, I'm going to redo my bass parts, just to lock them in because everything's so fresh and new and spontaneous. And so after the fact at home, I wrote other bass parts for several of the songs, and I sent them to Bob Ezrin, and he said, Dennis, no, the spontaneity that we captured in the studio is so good. Don't mess with it. And then so I went back and listened. I said, you know what? He's right. I'm getting too slick.
yeah. It's funny. I've heard that same thing. I've done a few interviews lately, and probably the past three interviews, I had Doug Aldrich on the other day. He's dropping an album as well, and he said the same thing. They were recording, and usually they go back and change some things, but the producer was like, no, it's a spontaneous. Thing is what kind of it's that organicness that kind of comes through sometimes. That's what you want in the final recording. Yeah, you can kind of keep going over stuff, but you'll lose that original kind of vibe, and that seems to be quite a familiar thing between lots of people who are recording. It's something you've got to try and capture that energy when you first think of it.
Exactly. Like I know Ian Hunter, and he always says the first initial concept is usually the best. But when I say that was Rick Tedesco playing guitar. Alice was in the studio just singing in our headphones for a guide. A lot of times he didn't even know the lyrics. He just hummed the verse melody and then hum the chorus melody and stuff, so we would have a reference to where we were in the song, like we used to do in the old days. And so that raw energy was really bass and drums, because that's what you go for on a bed track. And Michael redid all of his parts because this studio has all kinds of vintage amps, but they didn't have one that really suited Michael for what he wanted. So later on, he redid all of his guitar parts out in Phoenix, Arizona, and then Alice redid all of the vocals. And they would call me. Alice was very busy, so if he'd have a couple days off, Bob would get a studio and they'd go in and lay down another song or two. Yeah. They'd call me, hey, Den, what do you think the lyrics should be on this? And so I'd give them my 2 cents. And that's really when the polish of what Alice's talent is with the lyrics. He takes my melody, and he even takes my concept for a song and does the same thing all over, only he rewrites the song, only it's his version of what I did. Say like on One Night Stand. One Night Stand was originally called Eight Alive, which basically it was about a guy that goes and hangs out with this uh, uh, man-eater woman, and next thing you know, his wallet's gone, and he's
Yeah.
problem. Well, Alice takes the same idea, only it turns out that he's the one that has the upper hand in the end. So Alice loves that, put a twist in there.
Yeah.
But a lot of the Alice's overdubs came together uh, well, just on days off, out on the road and stuff.
Yeah, so it's quite crammed schedule, and I've always loved Alice's approach to songwriting. He'll always manage to make things a bit twisted, and and I'm sure you're all involved with your dark humor and stuff of the whole band. I'm sure you all had some dark elements to putting forward these twisted little ideas, and I think that's what made you guys so unique. The lyrics and the sound together, just nothing had been done like that. It's such a unique kind of sound, and I love it. It's yeah, amazing stuff. Right. Talking of a Black Mamba, I love the track. I love the kind of psychedelic kind of vibe to it as well. And going back to your early days, Pretties For You was kind of psychedelic. I don't know. Were you kind of back in those days? Were you going in kind of a Gong Hawkwind kind of direction? Were you kind of maybe going to go down a psychedelic route, or was that just sort of part of the expression of the band kind of thing?
Well, the band started, Alice and I were in art class together in high school, and we decided we wanted to start a band that incorporated artistic concepts and artistic ideas. So Pretties For You was definitely derivative of that. Uh, Personally, I was the crusader for, abstract music.
Awesome.
In fact, I thought "Pretties For You" was too commercial.
Oh, wow.
uh, but yeah, I mean, before we did "Pretties For You," we were a cover band that uh, we were a really tight band. We had the first song Alice and I ever wrote together made it to number 11 on AM radio in Arizona.
Wow.
And we were a pretty big garage band. We did "Don't Blow Your Mind," and we played at the most popular club in Phoenix. We were the house band, and we traveled all over the Southwest. And so, but we could have written more garage songs and maybe ended up like the Seeds or something out of LA. But no, we wanted to do our own thing. We wanted to discover something that had never been done before. And when we were jamming a lot and just experimenting with trying to come up with our own sound, a lot of that is on Pretties For You. A lot of it is just making up the craziest things that we could. And the lyrics were interesting because mainly because we were hungry, and there was this lady in Phoenix that was somewhat of a clairvoyant or something. And she would have us over and she'd have all this food. So, yeah, we're in.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then she would talk about how we're all one. So every person on earth, we're all one. And so we would take those kind of things that she would say and incorporate them into the lyrics, like surely, surely I am surely all the time.
Yeah.
So we're thinking, okay, if we're all one, then I'm also that hot chick over there named Shirley.
Yeah.
So, just goofing around with those kind of ideas. Uh, but I think without us doing that kind of abstract sort of music, sound collages, I call them. There was one on the Easy Action album called Lay Down and Die Goodbye, where in the middle it wasn't scales or anything, it was sounds. We were just creating, it was inspired by Carline Stockhausen and the electronic music pioneers. So we would do those abstract things. You could see some of it in the movie Diary of a Mad Housewife.
Right.
where we actually did a Mars Bonfire song. He was the writer that wrote most of the hits for Steppenwolf.
Wow.
The movie company, there was only going to be one song in the movie, but they had hired Mars Bonfire, so they gave us a vinyl album that had about 10 songs on it, and the only ones we really liked were the ones that Steppenwolf had already recorded, so we didn't want to do that. So we did one called Ride With Me, which actually Steppenwolf recorded later on.
Wow.
But so we said, okay, how long do we have to play this song for you to be legal and meet your contract? And then we played it for that long, and then we went into one of our sound collages,
Oh, great.
and it went totally crazy.
Oh, yeah, sounds like it. Did you ever get into kind of electronic music at all with that experimental stuff you were doing? Did you get into any kind of stuff like that?
I love no, not making it, but I love the Carline Stockhausen, the English translation is Song of the Youths.
Right.
And when we were working with Frank Zappa, Alice and I would go over to his house because the GTOs lived there, and Alice and Miss Christine had a relationship. But so Alice and Miss Christine would be over on the couch, talking, and Frank would, when he found out that I like electronic music, he had me sit down on the couch in his living room right in front of the fireplace, and that's where his stereo speakers could be heard perfectly.
Oh, nice.
There's a closet off to the side that was full of records. And so when Frank found out I like electronic music, he went in the closet and played a whole afternoon of Frank playing music for me.
Wow.
And one of them was the Song of the Youths, Stockhausen, live. It was performed live by these people that had operatic quality voices and stuff. So yeah, we were very influenced by that. And then I, doo-wop was big for me. That was what was tugging at my teenage heartstrings when I was first interested in girls and everything. And when Frank Zappa found out that I liked doo-wop, again, sit on the couch, and he's in the closet playing all these rare doo-wop songs.
Oh, amazing. Yeah. Oh, that sounds really cool. Cool. And thinking back to a performance which I know comes up a lot when you're on YouTube and that searching the original performances, is that iconic 1972 club performance. Do you have any particular memories of that when you're doing I'm 18 and all that stuff? Do you remember that performance that I'm talking about?
Where you mean the Top of the Pops or something?
It didn't say the details, but it just said club. Club is it's the one where Alice is drinking, while he's performing, and a kind of a psychedelic thing going on behind you guys on the video. I'm not sure exactly where it is, but it's kind of like.
Oh, I think I know what one you mean. There's a fake spotlight in it.
I think, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that was in Germany, and it was.
Right.
It was early in the morning, and we had to put on our jumpsuits from the show the night before that were still wet with cold sweat, and that was nasty.
Yeah.
And Glenn Buxton is not an early morning person by a long shot, and he walks in with a cigarette, and the people at the film company said, "No smoking allowed in here." And Glenn was not happy. He was not happy. And so, and that spotlight was fake. It's like they had some way of making it look like there was a spotlight aiming around the
Yeah, it was
stage.
weird,
But it was a special effect that they added later on.
Yeah, it's quite cool actually. I was trying to figure it out the other day. I thought it was quite different. The spotlight is one of those things. Unless you were there, you wouldn't think of it. But I was watching it and thinking it's quite a weird kind of show. All the effects and stuff. Yeah, to watch it for the time as well. It's quite advanced, I guess. It seemed quite.
It was. We had never seen anything like it, but we'd seen a lot of psychedelic effects that television stations would do back then.
Yeah.
But it's a good example because that is the version of 18 that we had written that Bob Ezrin heard us play in New York City.
Oh.
and it has the sprawling organ bluesy intro before the song kicks in. And so the first thing that Bob Ezrin did when he came to Detroit to work with us is he wanted to work on I'm 18. And the first thing he wanted to do is get rid of that long bluesy intro. And we're like, hey, wait a minute, we like that. And
It was cool. Yeah, I like that, Bruce.
yeah, well, we decided, okay, well, if you think this is a hit record, then let's follow your lead on that. But then we also felt better that we decided, okay, well, we'll play the long version on stage when we play live, which is what we did.
Awesome, yeah. Well, at least you kind of found a way around it. I think with a lot of these things, I think Queen had the same thing, didn't they, with Bohemian Rhapsody? Everything's got to be short, but luckily they managed to take a risk with that one. But there's not many people who could. You had to keep the songs at a certain length of time and all that.
Right.
Kind of
In our day, it had to be for AM radio, which played the hit singles. It had to be around 3 minutes.
Right.
If you were 3 minutes and 15 seconds, you're pushing it, unless you're the Beatles or something. But FM radio was the opposite. They wanted the long version of In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida and the long version of Light My Fire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So all of that has changed these days, but back then, and if you go all the way back to Elvis's day, it was 2 minutes.
Yeah.
A lot of Elvis's hits are like less than 2 minutes long. I mean, how do you get boring in 2 minutes?
Yeah, exactly. Maybe
And
that's
those old rock and roll reviews that would have Elvis and Richie Valens and everybody on the bill. Everybody would come out and do their 3 hits. So their set was like 6 minutes long.
Yeah. That's amazing.
How do you not be exciting in 6 minutes? But
Yeah.
for us, you're barely getting warmed up after playing 3 songs.
No, I know the feeling. Yeah, it takes me a while whenever I'm performing. It's probably, don't know, maybe the 3rd song and you start loosening up a bit there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. No matter how much you warm up before the show. We used to always try to have a good 15 minutes where we would tune up and then we'd just start playing something very simple and easy. And then we would start singing some Beatles song or something just to warm up our voices. And then you'd feel pretty warmed up. And then you'd walk to the stage and then it still took like 3 songs before you really settled in.
Yeah.
Rock and roll needs sweat.
It does. Yeah, you've got to have a bit of that. Yeah, and I was thinking about the albums. I remember a while ago, I think Alice was doing a live stream or something once years ago, and I asked him what his favorite song to record was in the studio, and I'm pretty sure he said Billion Dollar Babies. He had a lot of fun doing that. Do you have any memories of doing that? And what's your favorite album?
Well, Alice had come up with the title Billion Dollar Baby, so it was the first time that we decided we wanted to have a title cut on an album, because before we wanted the title of the album to be, none of the songs were written around that title. And so Alice had the idea, well, let's do the song Billion Dollar Babies to put on the album. So we all thought, oh, okay, let's work on that tomorrow, at rehearsal. And then Glenn Buxton and his friend Rockin' Reggie showed up at the next day's rehearsal, and they had a song, Billion Dollar Babies, which was really one of Rockin' Reggie's songs that he wrote, and they just changed the lyrics to say Billion Dollar Babies. The problem is Rockin' Reggie is an amazing songwriter in Roy Orbison ballad style. And that's what it was. And so we were in the studio, in our rehearsal studio in Greenwich, Connecticut, and where we cranked the volume. we played at full stage volume, and everybody's sitting on stools, and we're playing this ballad over and over and over. And I said, wait a minute, hold on. If this is going to be the title cut, we got to light some fire under it. And then everybody's looking at me like, well, what do you got? And so I didn't really have anything. I just went da 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 da. It's got to be like that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So then, okay, Michael, show me the chords. And then I made the bass run follow through the chords. And then Bob Ezrin said, okay, Dennis, once I got the bass line established, Bob Ezrin said, Dennis, show that to the guitar players. The rest of us are going to go in the other room and play pool and call us when you're ready. So I taught the line to Glenn and Michael and Rock and Reggie, I think. And then they came back, and I know Alice always remembers it that we wrote it around the drum track, but Neil came up with the drum thing after we came up with that riff.
Right.
And but we did write Generation Landslide around Neil's drum part and many other songs, so that
Yeah,
might be
that's
why
awesome.
Alice thinks remembers it that way. But that song is one of those things where Neil and I, it's like. As soon as you hear that song is next in the set, then you're ready for a workout because it's a challenge to play it properly
I'm sure. Yeah, yeah.
on drum, bass, and drums.
Yeah.
It's a heck of a lot of fun, but you got to stay on your toes. You can't be thinking about how cute the hat check girl is in the venue, you know?
Yeah, yeah. No, I've always loved your style of playing as well. You kind of make bass very interesting. The melodies you put underneath stuff, you can hear it. Kind of sometimes you're kind of doing melodies which are like sidewards melodies to the main melody. You kind of find these nice melodies in between and stuff. That's what I kind of like with your playing. Very unique and yeah,
Well,
it's
thank you very much. I always look at it like I want to take advantage of anything good that anybody else is doing. So, and the number one thing on my list to always be aware of is the bass drum.
mm,
And if Neil does a particular kind of a fill, then I might pick up on it and uh, support that with a bass line under the fill, or I might let it go depending on what I think is best. And then the other thing is if there's a guitar riff that I think the bass should all of a sudden in this part of the song, now I'm going to jump over and follow the guitars. And then a lot of it has to do with me writing, like you said, a counter melody to the lead melody, which is what made it difficult for me to sing and play at the same time because I'm playing a different
yeah,
rhythmic melody to what the singing is doing.
yeah.
There are other people out there like Sting and Paul McCartney that have no problem with doing that, but but, but I do.
Yeah, no, I think I'd struggle. That's yeah. Anything kind of like I play guitar and sing sometimes, but I try to just sing because it's even that can be quite a challenge, especially to do a good performance in both ways. The guitar and the singing. You kind of got to find if you're doing both, you kind of got to sometimes find a happy place. If you didn't have the guitar in your hand, maybe you could sing a bit better, but you got to get it at a good enough level, the two at the same time.
Exactly. That's because you're talking like if you're doing a lead riff or a lead fill, then quite often that's a counter melody.
Yeah, yeah.
Or it come where rhythm guitar, that's different. I can sing and play rhythm guitar on almost any one of my songs, and
Mm.
that's the other thing that we did differently recording this Revenge album. Uh, if I had a song like Blood on the Sun or Eight Alive, which became One Night Stand, or Wild Ones, I played guitar on it.
No.
We recorded it with me playing guitar so that I could show the other guys, or I could lay down the guide, and then once we got that and we made sure with Neil that the tempo was exactly what we wanted. Uh, and so once I recorded my guitar part, then the guitar players could learn that, and I would even sometimes play guitar while we were recording so they could see my chord hand and as a guide. But then I would switch over to bass,
Oh, wow.
and once the guitar players got it, then I would switch over to bass. So we did a lot of that, which we never did in the early days. The guitar players knew what they were going to do before we went in.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. It's cool you found a few new ways to kind of work together and yeah, make it a a really good final piece. I mean, from Black Mamba, I know the whole album's going to be amazing now, and it's yeah, it's I can
I,
tell.
I'm I'm very happy that they started with that song because I had, like you said, the dark side. That's why Alice always called me Dr. Dreary. Because I always favor the dark chord, minor chords, and I wrote Black Juju and stuff like that.
I love that.
But yeah, I actually recorded the guitar part that you hear on "I Hate You" from the Detroit Stories album.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that's the album that was on. But but anyway, yeah, as a guitar player, I'm a bass player. I'm, I just use open chords, the most basic chords, and then I make up a few chords which probably have a name that I have no clue what the name of the chord would be, and I favor those in almost everything that I write. A very, very similar chord pattern, but that's my style.
Yeah.
I'm happy within that little kind of limitation. Uh, so I played Blood on the Sun, played the whole thing, and then that one was very difficult because there's a tempo change in that song, and so you can't just go in with a click track and do it properly.
Mm.
We had to record with the click track for a certain part of it, and then the click track stopped, and then me and Neil are going to shift gears and go a little bit syrupy and pull things back, and
Yeah.
then slowly and gradual build it back up. The other thing about that song is it goes from 3/4 to 4/4 back and forth. So so then again, you've got a little bit of a tricky tempo thing to be aware of as we're playing it.
Yeah. So, and I heard there's also going to be quite a few directions where, kind of like the early music, and going by what you're saying there, with the changes, it sounds like some of the songs just go in a completely different direction, kind of midway through the song and stuff, kind of like the early days where it's the Alice Cooper band thing that you kind of can find a new direction in one song where a lot of people wouldn't do that change. There's a lot of surprise elements throughout, kind of thing.
Well, I've always been the crusader for that, even though I'm not the only person that comes up with those ideas. Neil and I are very experimental when we're deciding what is the best for each and every tiny part of a song. And we try to push it to somewhere new, and that's our signature style. So we always try for everything that you hear that sounds like one of those unusual departures. There's probably 100 more that we decided, well, this is cool, but it doesn't really help the song.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. We would experiment and we would go out as pioneer out as far as we could, but then we would have to reel it in to support the song properly.
Yeah, that's really cool, and I love how you kind of do that, and you've still got that experimental element in what you do, and I think that helps keep the sound fresh and kind of at least you make sure it works for the song as well. That's an important part of what you're doing. You're not just going off on one. You're going off on one, but you're also making sure it works. Kind of thing.
When I first met Ryan Roxie, we were backstage, and he was saying, I've learned so many of the Alice Cooper group's songs. He said, but I've always had one question: how come you guys always do things in threes? And I said, because I've worked with musicians. Well, that's you have to add one more. It's got to go to four. Why? It doesn't have to go to four.
Yeah.
My answer to Ryan was, I think we got bored by four. So we
That's
were in a hurry. We were in a hurry to get into something different.
That's really cool. Yeah. Oh well, I chatted with Ryan a while ago. Actually, he was on the channel a while ago, and
He's
yeah,
great.
he loves
They're
you.
all great.
Yeah, they're all really cool, and well, I'm so glad Alice is kind of back with you guys doing an album because I know so many of the fans love that early stuff, and that is, what most of Alice's stuff. People go back to those songs still today, so it's great to have some new stuff to listen to. And going back to an iconic album, School's Out. Do you have any memories of that and the recording process, or just the writing? And did you know it would be so iconic at the time? Did you have a feeling that that might be
The
the end?
song,
And the song mainly, yeah, and School's Out. Did you think that would?
well, the album was, the guys in the band look at it like it was Glenn Buxton's album because that was so, all that West Side Story stuff and all of that punk from the back of the class and the guy that's smoking cigarettes behind the gymnasium while Alice and I are running track. you know, it was so Glenn Buxton. But now, as opposed to being in Chicago, uh, for Love It to Death and Killer albums. Now we're in New York City. And not only that, but this was the first album that Bob Ezrin did on his own producing. Before we had Jack Richardson overseeing those albums. But I mean, we were experimenting like crazy, which, come on, let's tip a hat to the Beatles for that. We were like 3 o'clock in the morning. We ran a cord with a microphone all the way out through the alley in the back of the building out to the street. And every time a New York City cab driver would come by, and it was summer and it was hot, so they had their windows open, well, we'd yell at them and they'd yell back. So we wanted to record that and put it on the album. Unfortunately, all everything that the cab drivers yelled back was explicitives that we couldn't use on the album. So, but we had fun, and the like on Alma Mater goes into this kind of an old cowboy horse riding off into the distance sound, doom,
Yeah,
ba-doom, ba-doom,
I
ba-doom.
love that. Yeah,
And you hear a coyote. Well, that's me out in the alley behind the studio doing my famous coyote call that I
wow.
perfected on hay rides when Alice and I would go on hay rides in Arizona. I thought that that impressed the girls, even though I have no proof that it ever did.
Yeah. That was one of my favorite songs actually off the album. I always love that one. It's kind of
Neil wrote that, yeah.
yeah.
It's Camelback High because that's the school he went to, and then it says Cortez High because that's the one that Glenn and Alice and I went to. School's Out, the song itself, was the first time that we all knew it was going to be a hit. We wrote I'm 18 because the record company said 18-year-olds are that's the age group that buys the most records because they're still living at home and they have a job. So we wrote I'm 18 as big hit. Then on Killer album, we had Under My Wheels and Be My Lover, but they weren't quite as big of hits as 18 was. And we're saying, well, we got to write another song for this kid. And we all went to school together. So School's Out was just, is almost like we didn't write it. It's almost like just the creative gods dropped it right in our lap. But we knew it was a hit because I used to say, if I know what's a hit single, 90% of what's on the radio wouldn't be there.
Yeah,
I had no clue what a hit single was, but that one we knew. So we had all of the music and the arrangement. We all locked in on all of that, and then we had the lyrics. Except Bob Ezrin said, "Okay, this sounds like the hit. So let's really polish these lyrics to perfection." So he got a legal pad and a pencil, and we were all in a room together, and we started at the beginning, line for line, and we came to one line that nobody could come up with anything. And finally, Bob said, we're bogging down here. Let's go ahead and finish the song and come back to this. So the whole song was finished, but we still couldn't think of one line in the song. And we kept, the more we tried to think of what the line should be, the stupider it got. Finally, I said, hey, wait a minute. We're the kids at the back of the class. We can't even think of a word that rhymes, and Neil's like, oh, no shit, Sherlock. It's like, yeah, no, that's it. We can't even think of a word that rhymes. And then everybody, the light bulb went on in the room, and that's it. We
Yeah,
wrote it
that's
down.
perfect. It's such a great song. I mean, it's an iconic song, and I guess it's just relatable for everyone, pretty much. Everyone kind of
Yeah.
wants
The
to
only
get
the
out.
only people that it's not relatable to are about 1 year old.
Yeah, exactly. And I kind of like the whole album how you captured a bit of some of it's about, wanting to get out of school, and then the other side of it is kind of the sad bit of leaving your friends and things like that. So you kind of captured the whole vibe of leaving school in that sound. Even I used to listen to that album when I was kind of at the end of my school days, which I didn't enjoy very much, but the album gave me some,
Well,
happiness.
it's funny. School was like that for us. Well, Alice and I had such a Ferris Bueller thing going at school. I mean, we got away with murder. For
Yeah,
one thing, the high school was on its second year open when I started, and then third year open when Alice came, and a lot of the rules hadn't been etched into stone yet, so we were able to really uh, finagle our way around a lot of the rules and get away with murder, basically. I'm not sure that we learned a lot, but still, there's that thing where you don't like school until you're not in school anymore. And then all of a sudden you start missing all of the things that were cool.
yeah, I totally get that. Yeah, I think, it's kind of there was a freedom of that age, even though you were kind of controlled and you want to get out of that. There's a freedom of just not having the responsibilities, and when you're older, and it's kind of there's
Right. Not having to do homework for one thing.
that's one of the best parts. Yeah, that's it.
But see,
Paying bills,
that's,
man.
that probably is a big factor for the camaraderie and the chemistry of the Alice Cooper group because we all went to school, high school in the same town in the same year, and then when we were out of school, all of the things that you can look back on school and say you miss, we just took it with us. That became our show. That became the School's Out album. I
Yeah,
mean, it's just us, and even on this new album, School's Out had Blue Turk. This new album has What a Sid, which is along those lines. But as soon as we get together, I'm 78, but still we go in the studio recently, and all of a sudden I'm in high school again.
yeah.
Music, like I say, music, if it doesn't kill you, it'll keep you young forever.
That's it. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I kind of with the rebellion of that album. I remember on my last day of school, I was with a friend in the top up high, and we were throwing all the dictionaries out the window on our last day, and that was kind of
Oh,
our
all
schools.
right,
That was great.
all
Yeah,
right.
that's a memory that's just come back to me. I haven't thought of that for years, but yeah, it's a funny thing.
So we wanted, as far as Neil and I on the rhythm section on Schools Out, we decided that we wanted it to be militant,
Hmm,
like, hey, we're getting out of school, so on the choruses, Neil has like a bolero thing, but with the bass all downstrokes playing along with it, we got it to drive more in a more militant feel. And then when we got to the bridge, another one of those departure ideas, we wanted it to sound like little kids on a playground. So now the drums and bass, the bass, doo 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 doo.
yeah,
So
yeah,
so those were intentional choices that were to support the concept of the song, and that's how we worked. It's like what's the feel of the song? What's the song saying? And what can I musically play that supports that feel?
yeah. I love that. You really achieved that. I think that album will forever be an anthem. I can't see it ever getting old. It's perfect. We're on our last few minutes now, so I'm going to ask you some quick fire questions, or one big question about the new album, The Revenge of Alice Cooper. Do you have a top three songs on that album which spring to mind? We got about 4 minutes, I think. So, top.
Yeah, my three songs, out of four, I have four songs.
Oh, you're full as
I
well.
have 3.5 songs.
That's
Yeah,
okay. That
I'm
works.
very, I'm very happy with the songs that I brought to the table. Wild Ones, One Night Stand, Blood on the Sun, and See You on the Other Side. I know that's 4, but Neil and I wrote See You on the Other Side, so that's 3.5.
That's wicked. Yeah, 3.5 works. Yeah.
Not that I'm not happy with what Michael brought and Neil brought, because that's all great too. But I'm especially happy with how the band did the songs that I brought in.
Yeah, you're always gonna, have a special place in your heart for the ones you.
Yeah, but not always. Normally I wouldn't have gone that route, but on this album, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I can't wait. It drops. What date is it? July? Is it 30th?
July 25th.
25th. Yeah. Forget what I said. July 25th.
Yeah, and we're going to try to make it a big deal that day.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, I hope. And before you go, are you guys going to be on the road touring, or is it just a maybe thing?
I haven't heard anything definite. I've heard Alice talking about possibilities and stuff, but we're ready. All it takes is a phone call, and we're there.
Awesome.
You want me to play at Madison Square Garden tomorrow night? I'm there.
There you go. Well, there you go. Hopefully,
it has a lot to do with how big of an outcry the fans can make, because it has to do with the fans convincing the promoters to hire us.
Yeah. I'm sure they will. I know that from all the pages I'm on and stuff, the Alice Cooper pages, everyone's going crazy for this. Come on, everybody, let's get one last tour, or more than one. But yeah, let's see you out there again.
Well, I joked with Alice we should do a farewell tour like Cream, which lasted about 6 years or something.
Yeah, they all do
Or
that.
Motley Crue farewell tour. Oh,
That'll work. They all seem to do it, so there'll be no shame in that. But yeah, thanks so much.
It sells tickets. Yeah, thank you, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. No, it's been great chatting with you, and yeah, I can't wait to hear it. And yeah, everyone, go and grab it when it's out, and check out Black Mamba if you haven't yet, because it is amazing. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on the channel.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mexico is the place for me. I'm in Mexico. See the palm trees. I'm in Mexico. Pass the tapas, please. Gracias. Meet the girl of my dreams. Coco